Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest TMA virtual briefing exploring the tax cuts in the federal One Big Beautiful Bill Act and how Illinois manufacturers could be shortchanged by the governor's plan to decouple Illinois from the tax relief law. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant, and I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA news editor Fran Eaton, TMA state lobbyist David Curtin, as well as a very special guest, Dr. Will McBride, Chief Economist for the Tax Foundation. Good morning, Fran, David, and Dr. McBride.
Morning.
Morning, Rich.
Great to have you here. We're going to spend the next half hour discussing what's in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and what the repercussions will be for Illinois' small and mid-sized manufacturers if the state decouples from it. Before we get our interview with Dr. McBride, however, let's go to TMA state lobbyist David Curtin, who's in Springfield today on the last day of the veto session for the latest news on this issue and other issues. David, can you share what's going on in Springfield today?
Yeah, good morning. Last night, the House passed an energy bill, and the Senate's expected to pass it today. And then they'll go home until January. But in the meantime, the good news is they did not pass any tax increases. Mass transit was on the table and some tax increases. So they haven't done that as of last night. Now they have today, but I don't think they'll do it. And then the second thing is the governor and the legislature have not decoupled from the manufacturing provisions of this legislation of the One Big Beautiful Bill yet. And so that would have to wait till January at the earliest. But they did pass an energy bill. It's a $1.5 billion package. It's a pay-as-you-go, which means that consumers are going to pay for it as they go. And the idea is to store wind and solar. So in 5 years, your rates will start coming down. But these are the same people who told us the rates were going to come down 5 years ago when we passed the solar and wind. And so there's a lot of skepticism, but they did pass it, and the Senate probably will pass it today, and the governor will sign it. That just back to you, Rich, on but getting into that's what happened last night.
Great. Thanks, David. All right, now I'll turn it over to TMA news editor Fran Eaton, who will introduce our special guest and get the discussion started. At the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of Dr. McBride by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, back to you, Fran.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's so good to have you all here this morning to hear about this One Big Beautiful Bill. And I'm going to be referring to that as HR 1 in several times as we get through here this morning. But we've asked Dr. William McBride from the Tax Foundation to come and help us today to answer some questions about the overall One Big Beautiful Bill, to tell us how that affects manufacturing. And then he's going to talk just a little bit about what could happen, what would be the effect of decoupling on some of these major parts of that bill. I want just to introduce you a little bit to him. Dr. McBride is the chief economist and Stephen J. Eaton Fellow in Economics at the Tax Foundation, where he oversees major research projects primarily related to reforming the federal tax code, advancing sound tax policy, and improving the federal government's fiscal outlook. He holds a PhD in economics from George Mason University and has spent more than 10 years analyzing economic and policy issues. At the Tax Foundation, he served as vice president of the federal tax policy, leading the organization's efforts to research, model, and reform the U.S. tax code. His bio goes on, but I got to tell you, this just shows that TMA goes to the top-notch experts when we talk to them, right? So we're looking at that this morning, and we're excited about the part that he's going to share with us. So welcome, Dr. McBride. Welcome.
Thank you.
So our TMA members are eager to hear about how their manufacturing businesses will fare with the changes to the OBBB, and will make the federal taxes that will change in 2025. We understand that overall, that among the various industries, manufacturing fared the best in this OBBB. And we have a little graphic here that the Tax Foundation has put together for us to show the total of the tax provisions, and how manufacturing is the top benefactor of these. Would you please, Dr. McBride, would you provide a general overview of how U.S. manufacturers will be affected by the changes in this bill?
Certainly, yeah. So there was an intention here to support manufacturing in particular, but industry broadly through a number of provisions. And the most effective of those provisions, the most impactful in our analysis, are these expensing provisions, allowing companies to immediately write off their investment costs in the year that they are incurred. So that includes 100% bonus depreciation, which applies to equipment, and that's been part of the tax code on a temporary basis for over 20 years actually, but it's expired here and there and whatnot. But anyway, this now for the first time makes it first time in the history of the tax code permanent. And so there's no more monkeying around or uncertainty for businesses. They can, and unless something changes, unless Congress, changes course, which could happen sometime, but not in this Congress, that it will allow businesses to immediately write off their equipment purchases rather than waiting to write those off. So the normal process and the tax code would be a delay of several years to fully deduct those costs, and you lose in the meantime the value of that deduction due to inflation and the time value of money. So there's expensing for equipment. There's expensing for R&D, domestic R&D. Okay, so that's a return to the way it was prior to 2022. And that's very important for manufacturers as well. They certainly incur a lot of R&D costs for scientists, researchers, et cetera. And then you've got another category of expensing that's brand new, never been tried before in the history of the tax code. That is full expensing for certain types of structures aimed again at manufacturing in particular. So we await guidance on from the Treasury Department and the IRS as to what precisely which assets apply here, but it's certain categories of manufacturing and production buildings, such as factories. And that's a very big category, of course, and it really matters for manufacturers in particular. So there's three expensing provisions. There's a fourth for small business. There's permanence for 179 expensing. It's always been part of the code. It's at a low level, but it's been bumped up somewhat and made permanent. And then you've got finally a better treatment of interest deductions made on a permanent basis. Again, there was a limitation put on interest deductions as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. It was tightened in 2022. We're now going back to the more lenient restriction on those deductions. So those are the main provisions.
Okay, we could take down that image now, and we're all set with that. Thank you so much. So why do you think the administration was targeting manufacturing as the top notch? What are your thoughts on what you've heard or what you've seen? Why was manufacturing the key aspect?
Well, certainly there's the rhetoric, which most people properly discount from a politician, but in this case, the rhetoric is lined up with legislative action. The rhetoric being, that the whole America First, approach, trying to boost domestic manufacturing in particular. Certainly, President Trump has emphasized that for a long time now, and there's a few ways a few levers they're pulling here, but these are the big levers that have real promise to boost manufacturing in the U.S. The provisions I just mentioned. There are other provisions that are less directly aimed at manufacturers, but nonetheless manufacturers benefit. There's a reduction in individual income tax rates and made on a permanent basis. So reducing the top rate to 37% in particular. That applies to a lot of pass-through businesses, including manufacturers that may be organized as S corporations, for instance. And then additionally, there's the pass-through deduction that's been in place since 2017, but was due to expire. That's been made permanent. So that's effectively a reduction in that top rate to closer to 30%. So these are all impactful, aimed at manufacturing, I think will have an effect.
It just seems that there's a bit of a whole readjustment to the outline of tax benefits. When reading and just learning more from your Tax Foundation's website, you guys were like emphasizing that this was not necessarily just a change in the way that deductions are handled, but a whole perspective and appreciation for business as a whole in America, where that these are permanent things now. It should have been there. It should have been for a while. We're kind of going into a place where it wasn't before, and now it seems to be as if there's a appreciation for what our business owners do and how they, and it's shown in the tax benefits. Is that an accurate assessment of what I
Yeah,
see?
that's certainly right. I mean, I could go on. There's other dimensions by which businesses are being, like you said, treated better generally. There's an awareness and an understanding and an attempt to make business more attractive in the U.S. And that's these provisions I mentioned are really the main things that have changed for the good for manufacturers. But there's a whole effort to deregulate to benefit reduce permit times, et cetera, and that'll benefit manufacturers as well.
That's encouraging news for those of us who've been involved in this for a long time. And most of our members are in the small and mid-size manufacturing, so there's 500 and less employees. So they feel these things directly. For corporations, the OBBB revives and makes a 100% bonus depreciation for short-lived investments, repeals 5-year amortization of domestic research and development. You've already discussed all those, and makes more permanent, more generous limitation on interest deductions. You mentioned all that. How will those directly change? Let's just some specific things, if you could give some ideas of how that specifically could apply to our members.
Right. So for the normal treatment, as I mentioned, is depreciation and amortization. That is, so everyone's become accustomed to that. The whole business community, that's part of the income tax. It's been part of the income tax for 100 years or more. So the problem, though, as we pointed out at Tax Foundation, is that that's the way accountants think it should be done, which is fine. But match income with expenses. But from an economics perspective, it's not good. It means a delay of those deductions, essentially inflating those costs due to inflation and the time value of money. It's basically $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So that matters for businesses that are working at the margin with low margins. Certainly, and and particularly it falls on investment. So you're penalizing investment through that standard income tax treatment. So we have pushed for years to get away from that and go to a more pro-growth approach, which is full expensing, and we've made a lot of progress there. I mentioned bonus depreciation has been part of the tax code on and off for more than 20 years. And unfortunately, in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it was kind of a gimmick there where they tried to undo the normal treatment of R&D, which is expensing, and go and require amortization on that. thinking that no one would support that over the long run. It would be reversed, but it was not reversed when it came into effect in 2022. So it's been in place for about 3 years and been damaging for manufacturers and other businesses. So that's now been finally reversed back to expensing. Like I said, for the first time ever, they're now allowing some manufacturing and production structures to be fully written off. Now, there's a challenge there, of course, with companies that are operating at the margin and have low profit margins and may even be in a loss position. If you're in a loss position, you're not going to be able to immediately take advantage of all those additional deductions in the current year. So there'll be, you have to wait until you earn some higher profits. But on average, over the long run, it's very much a beneficial change for manufacturers in particular.
So overall, it looks like the tax burden will be less on manufacturers per se if we look at this paper and it looks like it applies that way. What would happen if the state of Illinois decided that that's just like lowering all of the taxes, that the money that we're getting into our treasury, because lower taxes at the federal level will possibly lower the taxes at the state level? How will that affect if maybe it won't be the whole bill, it'll be just maybe sections. Let's just say the depreciation issue. If they were to lower it just on that one section, what would that do to like the business owners in Illinois?
Well, it introduces, number one, an extra layer of complication that, taxpayers have to comply with both the federal taxes and then the state taxes, right? Here we're talking about income taxes. And so if they're doing two different things, you essentially have to run your taxes two different ways, right? So just on for certainty and simplification, the states should conform. Illinois should conform to the federal code to make it, taxes as easy to comply with as possible. But there's also the economics of it. So if you've got, at the federal level, companies are allowed to fully expense, say, equipment investment. But then they come to do their Illinois taxes and they have to comply with the depreciation schedules for those assets. Then you've got, again, a penalty at the state level on that investment due to the delay of the deduction. So it's the Illinois does not have such a high income tax rate as the federal government does, but it matters. It's an extra burden. And so that income tax rate in Illinois would then apply to that investment effectively. If Illinois does not conform to the federal code here. Now Illinois has a history of not conforming. Like I mentioned, business 100% bonus depreciation has been part of the code off and on for years, and Illinois has chosen to decouple from that federal provision. So there's, I think, I'm not exactly sure the procedure, if nothing is done. You mentioned at the top of this call here that they may not do anything in this session on this front, but they may next year. If they do nothing, I believe it's the case that it continues to be a decoupling from bonus depreciation. But don't quote me on that. That's something, to check with your advisors on. But the other provisions, for R&D expensing, Section 174, that is, that is apparently occurring on a rolling basis in Illinois, as I understand it. Likewise with the new with the small business expensing, Section 179, and then the new structures provision, I believe, is also on a rolling basis on Illinois. So that I think those are all areas where it could certainly change again, I think you need to follow the action in Illinois and make sure that they do conform ultimately to the federal code. That will be the most beneficial treatment for investment in the state of Illinois.
And we certainly want to see more growth in manufacturing here in Illinois. I'm just real excited to see if there's anything from our watchers and the viewers that are out there. Do you have anything, Rich, for us that you'd like to add to this?
Thanks, Fran. We do have a question that came in, but also just a reminder to our members on the webinar today that if you do have a question, you can type it in, submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel, and I'll read the questions and ask our special guest to answer them. So I do have one question, and it's going back, I think, to the small business side, Dr. McBride, and it says, I know C corporations will benefit significantly. How does the One Big Beautiful Bill help small businesses such as S Corps? I know you mentioned Section 179 expensing. Is that so in this bill, is that treated differently than currently? And are there other things that specifically would benefit small businesses that are not C Corps?
Certainly,
Dr. McBride?
that's right. It's a more generous treatment of small business expensing, Section 179. That I don't know the exact parameters off the top of my head, but it raised the threshold of the amount of investment that gets that treatment. So that's called small business expensing because it applies to the first dollar of investment in it, and then it's capped. So and then it's taken away over a range, and so it does not apply to big businesses. So it's very much strictly available to businesses making small amounts of investment in the in the millions of dollars rather than in the billions of dollars. And so that provision is also made permanent. Okay, that's a provision that's always been at a lower level of investment, like less than $1 million, typically, of investment, and it's always been on a temporary basis. So there's this uncertainty problem for businesses. Will it apply if I build a new factory and have to, incur new costs for equipment, et cetera? Will it apply? And no longer. The certainty is introduced here in a big way. The other provision I would mention here that applies to small businesses is the rate and the effective rate. I mentioned for pass-throughs, the question was mentioned S corporations. Those are pass-through businesses that can utilize the pass-through business deduction, Section 199, that is a 20% deduction for against that rate. So essentially, it's again brings that top, if they're at taxed at the top individual rate of 37%, that effectively brings it down to closer to 30%. So these are all very beneficial things for small business in particular.
So that last one you just mentioned on the effective rate, that's new? That's a new provision?
That's an extension of what
Okay.
has applied since 2017. It was introduced in 2017 as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, due to expire at the end of this year. There's a lot of concern about that. Again, the uncertainty of it. As well, the top rate was due to snap back to 39.6%. So instead of 39.6% applying next year to pass through businesses, it's at about 30%. So
That's significant.
It's pretty significant.
That's
Coming
great.
from Illinois, that's always good news to hear something of a little bit more of an ease for us to be able to encourage our businesses. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And that can't be undone so easily anyway by the Illinois government, because that's a rate. These other things, expensing, are the tax base, and that's where they can choose to conform or not in Illinois. But the rate is the rate at the federal level, and that's there to stay. So that's important.
That's great. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, we have another question submitted from a TMA member. Question for Dr. McBride is, Of all the tax cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which one do you think offers the most benefit to manufacturers? The top one. Dr. McBride?
I would say that, I mean, in the long run, as the law is written, it's the bonus depreciation for equipment provision because it's made permanent. The structures provision uh, in the short run is quite beneficial, but it is only temporary. That expires essentially at the end of Trump's term. Construction must begin before 2029, and the factory, for instance, the asset must be placed in service within before 2030.
I have
2031, I think that's right. So there's a limitation there for sure, and giving permanent time and everything. There's some, you're up against the clock in many cases. But it will boost that investment in certain types of buildings in the short run. But we don't count it in the long run, although we'll certainly be advocating for making that provision permanent.
When I read that, I was thinking about all these foreign companies that are promising to rebuild here in America, bring manufacturing here. And I thought the construction industry is going to be very excited about this if indeed they have to get a whole building completed by 2031. That's pretty incredible if they are to do that.
Right,
this.
right.
Well, thank you. We do not have any more questions left, and I think we're about out of time anyway. So I want to thank you, Dr. McBride, for joining us today, along with our state lobbyist, David Curtin, and our news editor, Fran Eaton, for leading a wonderful discussion. And as always, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took the time out of their day today to join us. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.